Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Are you tired of the same old blah, 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 blah from the media? Do you like unfiltered commentary? Would you like to go back to the days when our rights meant something? Well, you've come to the right place. Crisco's Corner. The fight to get back the ideals of our founders will be long and hard. Please support the channel by subscribing. And as always, thank you for your support. Hi, folks. Welcome back to Crisco's Corner. From just the news, I thought it would be a little change of pace from the usual madness that's going on in politics and in government lately. Last living WATERGATE burglar dead at 98. Martinez was a member of the five-man team that broke in the Democratic National Committee headquarters in June 1972. Now, I was 16 years old that November of 72, and I remember it was a huge deal. When I got out of high school in 74, that summer, Richard Nixon resigned, the only president to ever resign. And we look back on it now, and there was a really good movie made about it, All the President's Men. But to be honest with you, now that you look back, and some of the crap that's happened since then concerning government and intelligence agencies and politics, and it gets messy. This wasn't that big of a deal. And it caused the only resignation of a U.S. president. And I remember. And that, I think, was the beginning when it started me being a Democrat, that, of course, the media made it out to be the greatest thing and the worst thing that ever, constitutional crisis. And the fact of the matter was this. A bunch of guys broke in the Democratic headquarters, illegally, of course, and broke the law, to bug and spy on the Democrats in the presidential election. But the weird part about it was the fact that Richard Nixon was a shoo-in to win again. I mean, Jesus, it was a foregone conclusion. Tells you how paranoid sometimes you get in politics. And Richard Nixon had nothing to do with the break-in. And there was all kinds of, cash floating around and money just changing hands and all kinds of crap, They used to, in the movie, the one guy called it rat effing. They used to do that in college, and it was just the usual stuff that was involved in politics, and one side trying to screw over the other, and it's been still going on to this day. But the thing is, now what happens is they're using government agencies to spy on your opposition, and it's starting to get a lot creepier. But if Richard Nixon's people or Richard Nixon himself had said, listen, here's the deal. When they, went to him privately, and he shouldn't have recorded all those meetings. Jesus, remember, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, some of you can look it up. He was recording all his meetings in the Oval Office. And then, of course, there was the huge subpoena from the Supreme Court. I think there was 17 minutes missing. They were supposedly erased by accident. And it was just, what a cluster F it was. It was just botched horribly. All Richard Nixon had to do was, before you start, I want to know nothing about nothing. I don't want to know who was involved, what was involved, where the money came from, how they got paid, who gave them the order. If it was my chief of staff or anybody else down, you guys take the hit. You take the bullet from the president. I know nothing about it. And he didn't. That wouldn't have been lying. Very much like Ronald Reagan when I ran Contra. Plausible deniability, I think the term is. But he had to get involved in it. And it just, it was ridiculous. I mean, even at the beginning, if you said, you know what, those guys did it. I heard about it. It was really stupid. I was pissed. And I told them it was bullshit. And, let them plead guilty. And that's the end of it. But, of course, they had to try to cover it up. And that was the beginning of the end. Any hockey players know that. My brother used to be a hockey player, rest his soul. And if you're a hockey player and somebody does something crappy to you, high sticks you when ref isn't looking or does something, and then a minute or two later you retaliate, you get caught. You can't do the cover-up. You can't retaliate. You can't. You always get caught. Always, always, always. Now, of course, today, depending on what political party you are, and it's, well, I'll be fair, both parties, you can pull some crazy shit and do a lot of illegal stuff, and nothing ever seems to happen. And it's a shame. But Watergate wasn't that big of a deal. And I remember, I suggest, even though I'm not a Bernstein fan, he's turned into a real piece of crap, but it was a good book. And that's when investigative reporting was investigative reporting. Now, granted, the media was still left. The media was biased against Republicans and conservatives. But this was a real story. And it's a very good one, I might add. And they did an amazing job, those two. Beating the pavement back in the old days, hitting the phones, knocking on doors, do the gumshoe reporting that used to be done. And now it's just laziness where you look up something on Wikipedia or you find a quote from somebody that somebody said about something else and use it as a source. There's many times in the movie, Ben Bradley used to be, I believe he was the editor of the Washington Post back then. Washington Compost now. At least they were way more of a real newspaper than they are today. Wanted at least two sources on every story. At least two credible ones. Today, a source close to the White House said, a source not speaking anonymously because not allowed to speak on this topic said, a source close to the White House. What the hell is that, the janitor? I mean, come on. But it was real reporting. Let's read the short story here. The last surviving burglar of the 1972 Watergate break-in, which led to the resignation of then-President Richard Nixon, has died. Eugenio Martinez, a Cuban exile who worked for the CIA, died in his daughter's home near Orlando, Florida, at age 98. According to the children of the Brigade 2506, a veterans group of Martinez's fellow anti-communist Cuban exiles. Their abortive invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs in 1961 to overthrow the government headed by Fidel Castro was covertly supported by the Central Intelligence Agency, according to the New York Times. Martinez's cause of death has not yet been disclosed. Martinez was a member of the five-man team that broke in the Democratic National Committee headquarters on June 17, 1972. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy, burglary, and wiretapping charges early the next year. Martinez, along with the other burglars, he served about 15 months in prison. Martinez and three other burglars sued former Nixon campaign officials, alleging they were tricked into believing they were going to work on ensuring national security. They each received a $50,000 out-of-court settlement in 1977. Now, 1977 was 3 years after I got out of high school. $50,000 was a crap load of money. It's got to be at least $150,000, $200,000 today, which doesn't, he gave up 15 years of your life, but these guys really thought they were defending their country. I remember in the movie when they were arraigned the next day, and Woodward was there in the courtroom, and the judge asked for the individual's name, what they did for a living, and he said his name, and he said anti-communist. And they were all Cuban exiles, and they hated communism, and they hated Castro, and they hated what Castro did to their country and the island they loved. I believe in a lot of ways they were patriots. In 1983, Martinez received a pardon from then Ronald Reagan. He was the only burglar in the Watergate scandal to receive a pardon. Nixon was pardoned by Gerald Ford, his successor, I remember, and everybody screamed and hollered. It would serve no purpose after Richard Nixon resigned. And back then, of course, it was a little bit different. The impeachment laws are in the Constitution were the same. A majority of the House of Representatives vote yes or no for impeachment, and then it goes to the Senate for trial. The rules didn't change at all. The only difference was when this one, unlike today's impeachment fiasco BS, there were many, many people on the Republican side, which was Richard Nixon's party, that also were coming out in favor of impeachment. And it was really a bipartisan impeachment, as much as that can be done in a bipartisan way. And the handwriting was on the wall. It was really pointless to go to a Senate trial, put the country through that. Because, in all intents and purposes, he was guilty. Should Richard Nixon have gone to jail? Nah. You cover up something somebody else does. It's just stupid. Resigning the presidency was way more punishment than going to jail in the country. It wouldn't have served any purpose at all. And after he left, of course, Gerald Ford, who was made president, after he resigned, he was vice president. I think Gerald Ford was a good man, too. I remember at the time I was younger, and I thought, oh, this is all bullshit, and all these Republicans are evil, and that set me on the wrong path for a long time. And I was a Democrat right up until 2013. I used to be a local elected official. I used to be a city councilman in the early 2000s. In 2013, I left the party, but this really put a sour taste in my mouth as a young man, late teens. And that carried over for a long time. But now I look back at it and I'm older. It wasn't that big of a deal, frankly. It really wasn't. But it was news, and it made the news every day for a long time. And I think that set the country on the wrong path for quite a few years. We ended up with Gerald Ford, who finished out the remainder of the term, ran for president, and lost to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was an excellent man. He's an excellent human being, top-notch, but he sucked as president. For those of you out there that hate Donald Trump's guts, look at Jimmy Carter. Well, you have to be a good man and a good person to be president. Bullshit. To be a good president, you have to be a good president. Your personality, does it matter? Yeah. I mean, does it help you win over people? Yeah. But your personality has nothing to do with your job performance. And Jimmy Carter is a classic example of it. And Trump is the other extreme. And I'm still a Trump supporter. But I remember this. God, it was a huge deal. And Richard Nixon resigned. And it was really, really something. And it was just, looked like America was just, it was getting to the end of the Vietnam War. And things were not going well. The protests of the war, and the economy was starting to go down, and things weren't just going right. And everybody was talking, this is the end of America as we know it. This is the end of, Reagan used to call the shining city on the hill. This is the end. The Americans have finally stepped in it. And blah, 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 blah. And the whole country was in turmoil. And then Jimmy Carter, and then the Arab oil embargo. That was before we were energy independent, thanks to President Trump, but that's being reversed quickly. And gas was going way up, and there were ration lines. I remember it was, what a cluster blank that whole time period was for everything. And people's ideas on America itself were put in question, very much like today. And I personally believe it was around that time, late 60s, early 70s like this, that the universities, the professors, the people in charge of academia started their assault on America itself through America sucks, America's racist, America's this, America's that, America's evil, blah, 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 blah. And it carried on for what? What is this now? 2, almost 3 generations later? It's I think that was the beginning of what we have today in academia. Now we have students cranked out of universities that hates the country's guts, that hates this place with a passion. And I think it all began back then, late 60s, early 70s. And in all fairness, the Republicans did nothing to stop it. Ronald Reagan did some things, but the universities just kept on cranking out this progressive propaganda bullshit. And here we have today. And you reap what you sow. But anyway, I just thought this was interesting. It was one of the huge events in American history, at least in the 20th century. U.S. president resigning. over some chicken shit burglary. It was, 5 guys broke in. Security guy saw some tape on the door, leaving it unlocked, which caused them to investigate. And then they got the flashlights, and then the police were called, and they searched the floors of the Watergate Hotel. I guess there was a hotel and a lot of offices. And the National Democratic Committee, the Democratic National Committee had big offices in the Watergate Hotel, and they broke in to bug the place and got caught. And the rest of it is what it was. And those of you that ever want to see how it came about, I know it is a movie. It's not an historical book, but All the President's Men was a fairly good depiction of what happened. And just by a weird coincidence, the individual that's in there, they call him Deep Throat. He was the deep source in government that was feeding Woodward and Bernstein information concerning Watergate to help them along. I forgot the gentleman's name. See, it's weird. I can't remember now. But he just died 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And they finally said who he was. And Woodward and Bernstein, of course, wouldn't say. They had a deal that unless the person gave permission or the person died, they would not reveal his name. But he revealed his name himself. I forget what he did. And he thought what was going on was wrong. And he blew the whistle on him. And rightfully so, but I think the penalty paid by the country and Nixon and a lot of those guys, the penalty was way higher than the crime because use today's standard. My God, it's nothing compared to what goes on today. And not only do they not get caught and go to jail, they actually make out financially, socially. They become famous. They write books. And somehow that the Constitution doesn't really matter anymore, and it's sad. But anyway, folks, here's a little bit of history coming to an end. So I guess technically we can say that the Watergate scandal of the 1970s is finally over. The last Watergate burglar has died. And until next time, folks, goodbye and good luck.